Alright, it was a perfect day for painting today. In fact, irony, I ended up having to paint some white trim on our house. Great day for it, just a couple small areas that needed some white trim paint. So I did that first in the morning, taped off the areas that needed to be painted them, and then while the first coat was drying, I did these. Now, these are the horseshoes, which I had already printed. However, I had runs. One of them had a pretty heavy run down here to the point where it kind of bubbled up. And the other one had some runs around these openings, and I think around one of these openings, and might have been a little run in the middle here, just a little one. And that was from trying to get the paint in to those openings by being impatient, I guess, and spraying upwards and then downwards. Well, now that's two coats in the top area because it hits the top and goes in the sides. So I ended up with too much paint, my usual. Also, there was not enough paint around here. You could see through some of the gray primer. That was because what I've got here is outside I've got the thing that I hang things on to paint, and when this hangs up like this, that's facing the ground and at a height where I have to squat down to get the can to paint the bottom, and it's in shadow, and so it's really hard to see if I've got enough paint or too much paint on anything that's facing the bottom. So what I ended up doing this time was, first of all, I got 400 grit sandpaper and I sanded the top and I sanded the sides. I did not sand the ridges in there. They're pretty good. There might be a couple small areas where there's just a bit of gray showing that are so small that if I'm worried about them, I can just touch them up with a brush really easy. But I didn't want to get too much overspray on the ridges inside. When I peel this paint off, I have a feeling some of the white might come off, but if it does, it's on the top of the ridges, and I plan to go over those with maybe a paint pen to get silver on the ridges in this area. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look at other droids, look at reference shots from the movies. There are some ridges, you can kind of see the ends of them there, because this was originally like stacked aluminum plates, or at least made to look like it was stacked aluminum plates with gaps between. The gaps were white and it was bare aluminum facing the outside on the ridges. So I plan on painting with maybe a paint pen over the white to try and get that look on this piece. So anyway, that's why I've got blue tape there. So I decided, sand it down with 400 grit on the sides and the top, and then take it out to paint again. Now this time, instead of having it hanging like this at a height where I have to squat down to get underneath it, I held this in my hand. So I was able to lift it up, so I'm still underneath it a little bit, because I didn't want to spray my hand too much. But I was able to get a much better view, and I was able to turn it. And then as far as the drips, two things. I was careful with the drips. I did like a spray kind of at a down angle first over the piece, and then let it flash for a few minutes to dry a bit, and then held it up and went at an up angle to get the upper part of those openings. I didn't do it both at the same time. I gave it a minute or so to dry. And the same thing going around the side. I did the side, and then I would let it wait for a minute or two, just holding it, and then I would do part of the top, and then let it wait for a minute or two, and then go back to another coat on the side, wait for a minute or two, and so that's what I ended up doing. The other thing that I can't really show with one hand is part of the reason why I got drops paint runs is because it was hanging Not even really like this. I think I had it through one of the other holes, one of the ones down there. So it wasn't horizontal. It was at kind of an angle. The paint is going to run with gravity. So because I wasn't painting the back, that was already painted. You don't see it anyway. It's painted good enough. What I was able to do is after I sprayed the edge, or when I sprayed the top, what I did was with one hand, which again I can't really show too well here, but I was able to hold the wire at the top with one hand, and then my other hand I stuck underneath the bottom of this and held it like this. And so that way the gravity is letting that paint kind of spread out across the surface more and not try to pool down at the bottom. So this is still, I only did that 4 or 5 hours ago, so I haven't really had a good look at it. So I'm looking at it now, and apart from a couple little pieces of dust and maybe the tip there isn't quite got enough paint. I don't see gray. It just looks a different texture when I get the light shining on it. It's tons better than it was. There's no obvious drips. If there's an area that's a little light on paint, I'd rather have that than a big drip. Eventually, if I weather it, which I've said before, I'm worse at weathering than I am at painting, but if I weather it, yeah, just put a little weathering right there, or don't even put weathering. It's already weathered. It's like the paint is, he's rubbed up against something. It's rubbed the paint. So anyway, yeah, I held the wire with one hand, stuck my finger under this, and so also that helped with the paint on the sides. So instead of it wanting to pool at the corners and down at the bottom there, and down at the bottom there, holding like this for a few minutes while it got, the layer of coat got tacky. If it was going to run, the only thing it would do is run kind of down. And looking at it now, the camera's probably not going to be able to pick this up. Yeah, it's having a hard time focusing as it is. There's too much going on here. I don't see runs. So really happy with this. Another tip that I don't know if I mentioned before, if you're going to hang something up, I discovered that household AC wiring, right, that's in your house, the type that's in our house, I think is pretty common. It comes in, it's like a white plastic casing that's flat, that's got 3 wires in it. It's got black, white, and green. Or, wait a minute, black, white, and plain copper, I think. Others might be black, white, and green. Anyway, the copper wire in that household wiring is just the right gauge to fit through these holes. So, that was pretty neat, that all I had to do was straighten the end of one of these out and stick it through the hole there. It's got a nice pre-made thing that you can hang onto there if you're gonna hang it on something with a wire. So yeah, should probably take that blue tape off soonish, just because it's not fully dry. There, I could try to get it as close to the edge without going up to the surface. So there's a little layer that might have got paint on it that would just take a really light sanding if it's a bit thicker. But looking at the tape, not much paint at all got on there. So I'm feeling good about that too. That just seemed to work out. So I still have the issue of, am I going to clear coat? And clear coat's yellow unless you get the $20 whatever per can automotive clear that is a 2-part thing that mixes together when you first start using the spray can and lasts only for a couple days, but it's supposed to not get yellow and be much harder than, say, a Rustoleum clear, which is, everything on this is Rustoleum paint to this point. But yeah, I'm still not sure what the heck I'm going to do. I did like the finish when I was sanding this. with the 400 grit paper to get the drips off. It gave it a really nice satin finish. I went a little bit too far in a couple areas. Had the sandpaper on a sanding block, so there's some areas like right here that I went down a bit to the primer, so the paint wasn't quite as thick there. But it almost makes me wonder if I go over it with, say, 600 grit, that'll make it look really uniform, and or maybe even 400 grit, just don't use a sanding block, and might be able to get it all uniform, and that would help with the clear coat, because then the clear coat would have something to grab onto and it would have a uniform finish. Whereas now, if you just leave it white, again, the light is not going to cooperate in here, but you can just see where, just from the spraying, like I was saying, this corner here, for example, this point here, a little bit light on the paint, so it's not like perfectly uniform. But again, that's like, I mean, how far is this camera away? And with the light as it is right here, you don't even see it. So I don't know how picky I'm being, probably too picky. But this is part one. I'm gonna stop the camera and bring something else in that's also related to sanding and painting. But wanted to show that I was very happy with the way the second attempt at painting these horseshoes turned out. I did this outside. It was fairly windy. I was worried about that. There are a couple really small bits of dust or whatever on these if you look really close, but I was really pleased that the wind was making it dry pretty quick compared to the warm temperature, and then as soon as I was done painting it, I laid it flat on one of these boards that I've been doing, obviously, primer on. That's multiple coats of primer there. And then I brought it into my garage so no dust would fall on it after painting it and getting it into the garage. So, yeah, it turned out really good. My legs have a little bit of... R2D2's legs have a little bit of white paint run, again due to gravity, and I'm not sure if I'm gonna again sand that. I am not gonna sand the entire legs and repaint the white. That's just seems crazy to me, but I am thinking of, like I did here, maybe because of the result I was seeing when I sanded this with the 400 grit, maybe sanding those drip areas with 400 grit and then sanding the whole leg, and again that'll give it a matte uniform finish, and then a clear coat on top of that would look really nice. But I still haven't decided. Obviously this is not going to get done this year. I knew I was going to have time to paint. I didn't know how picky I'd be and keep working on parts, trying to get them better and better. So I've had lots more time. This summer has been really, really sunny. I've said this before too, I think, but I still haven't been able to get everything that I wanted to painted. In fact, the body is not painted yet, but that will be in the continuation of this. That I will stop talking now, stop this, and then I will start filming that. In fact, I'll probably just make that a separate video, because it is talking about the body and prepping for paint, whereas this is talking about paint. So, yes, horseshoes, second paint went much better than the first.